Emma, did you change your clothes? Did you pack your lunch? Mary Johnson called out while quickly preparing breakfast in the kitchen during the busy morning rush. 6-year-old Emma, wearing her small backpack, responded energetically from the living room. All set. You prepared everything yesterday, remember? Mary smiled as she rescued the toast that was about to burn. Life as a 32-year-old single mother required a tightrope walker's sense of balance every day. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital, managing night shifts while raising Emma alone. Remember, there's a brownie meeting today, so I've already told them I'll be picking you up a little late. The after-school club will look after you. Emma nodded and ran toward the cereal bowl Mary had prepared. Her bright smile had the magical power to melt Mary's heart even on the most exhausting days. Mom, when are we going to visit Grandma and Grandpa? Mary's hands paused for a moment at the sudden question. She took a deep breath and answered in the most natural voice she could manage. Well, they're busy, so. In reality, her relationship with her parents, Barbara and Robert, was complicated. The couple was enjoying a wealthy retirement. On the surface, they were refined and polite, but Mary had been troubled by their coldness since childhood. Her mother Barbara, in particular, always valued social appearances and propriety, directing a cold gaze toward the daughter who didn't meet her expectations. When Mary became pregnant at 18 and the child's father wouldn't take responsibility, Barbara's first reaction was, "How embarrassing." Robert maintained his silence, simply hiding behind his newspaper. In the end, they provided minimal assistance for the sake of keeping up appearances, but it always came with conditions and criticism of Mary's choices. Grandma and Grandpa love Emma. Just in their own way. Mary hated lying to her daughter. But it was difficult to make a child understand the complexities of adult relationships. She wanted to keep Emma's relationship with her grandparents pure, even if she herself suffered from that relationship. In contrast, Mary's sister Caroline was her parents' favorite. She always made choices that met their expectations, graduating from a prestigious university, becoming a corporate lawyer, and marrying the right person. Barbara and Robert proudly talked about Caroline and displayed her photos in their living room. Meanwhile, photos of Mary and Emma were only small frames placed on a shelf where visitors couldn't see them. Mary's smartphone rang with a call from the hospital. A colleague was requesting a shift change. She sighed deeply. The additional shift meant much-needed income, but it also meant less time with Emma. "Mom, are you okay?" Emma's innocent eyes looked up at Mary. Mary smiled gently. "I'm fine, just thinking about work. Come on, finish eating and brush your teeth. We'll be late for school." While driving Emma to school, Mary watched her daughter in the rearview mirror. Emma was humming along to music through her earphones, looking out the window illuminated by the morning sun. Mary's heart was filled with love, even as she thought about the tense relationship with her parents. She had spoken with Caroline a few weeks ago. Her sister was, as usual, boasting about their parents, but seemed to notice when Mary became quiet. "Mary, I know it's always difficult to talk with you. But our parents are worried about you and Emma," Caroline said. "They're getting older, and we should spend more time together as a family. Emma is a wonderful child, they'd like to know her better." Mary gave a wry smile. "Caroline, don't you remember what my childhood was like? How critical Mom was, how indifferent Dad was. They practically disowned me when I got pregnant." Caroline frowned. "The past is the past, Mary. They've changed. They want to know Emma better." Mary nodded silently. She understood that her sister couldn't comprehend her experience. After all, Caroline had always been the apple of their parents' eyes. When they arrived at school, Emma waved cheerfully and ran to her classroom. Mary smiled, vowing in her heart to protect this small being no matter what. Despite the difficult relationship with her parents, she intended to maintain minimal contact for Emma's sake. Even if it was only a superficial relationship, she wanted her daughter to know better family bonds. As Mary drove away, she wondered, would her parents ever change? Or would this cold relationship continue forever? She didn't know. All she could do now was focus on protecting, loving, and giving Emma the warm home that she herself never experienced. On her way to the hospital, Mary noticed a dull pain in her right side that she had been feeling for several days. She told herself it was just fatigue. As a nurse, she tended to prioritize her patients and daughter over her own health. Still, if something happened to her, who would she ask to take care of Emma? Her friends all led busy lives. Would her parents be the last resort? That thought left a seed of anxiety in her heart. Ms. Johnson, this condition requires emergency surgery. In the hospital examination room, Senior Dr. Richardson spoke with a stern expression while looking at Mary's test results. The pain in Mary's right side had worsened, and she had finally taken a colleague's advice to get examined. You have acute cholecystitis. The inflammation has progressed considerably, and there's a risk of gallbladder rupture if left untreated. I'd like to perform surgery today. Mary bit her lip. As a healthcare professional, she understood the seriousness of the diagnosis. Yet, despite being a nurse, she had neglected her own health, and this was the result. Is tomorrow not possible? I need to find someone to look after my daughter. Tomorrow might be too late. As a medical professional, you should understand. We'll make a surgery slot for this evening, so please start preparing immediately. Mary's mind was in confusion. What about Emma? Various options raced through her head. Her friend Sarah, who usually looked after Emma, was away on business. The after-school club wouldn't watch her until evening. Her colleagues had their own families to care for. Including the recovery period, she would need to find someone to take care of Emma for at least 2 days. She took out her smartphone and scrolled through her contact list with trembling hands. After making several calls, none of her friends could help. Only one option remained. With a deep sigh, Mary dialed her parents' number. Hello, this is Barbara Johnson. Her mother's cold voice echoed in Mary's ear. Mom, it's Mary. She felt her voice becoming smaller. I'm terribly sorry, but there's an emergency. I need to have gallbladder surgery suddenly today. Mary explained the situation and asked if they could take care of Emma for 2 days. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Barbara finally exhaled. Well, I suppose we have no choice. But we're busy too. I have a luncheon at the golf club tomorrow, and Robert has to attend a board meeting. Mary closed her eyes. Please, Mom. I have no one else to ask. All right. But don't expect too much from us. We'll do the minimum while you're in the hospital. After making arrangements, Mary contacted the school to inform them that her parents would pick up Emma. Then she completed the necessary admission procedures. As the surgery preparations progressed, Emma never left her thoughts. Grandma, Grandpa. Emma called out, half excited and half nervous, as she got out of the car in front of her parents' luxurious home. Barbara stood at the door with a stiff smile. Emma, don't shout like that. The neighbors will hear. Mary got out of the car and brought a small bag. Mom, thank you so much. This bag has all of Emma's clothes and necessities. She doesn't have any medications or allergies. Just remember, her bedtime is 8 o'clock, and she can't sleep without her favorite stuffed animal. Barbara just nodded slightly, took the bag, and quickly placed it inside the house. Robert was sitting on the sofa in the living room, reading a newspaper. He only looked up and gave a brief nod to his granddaughter. Hello, Emma. Hello, Grandpa, Emma replied in a small voice. Mary placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder, trying to reassure her. Barbara, Robert, thank you so much. I should be discharged the day after tomorrow. I'll come pick her up then. Robert said nothing and returned to his newspaper, while Barbara folded her arms. All right. But remember that you've ruined our schedule. Mary kissed and hugged Emma. Mommy will be back soon, okay? Have a good time with Grandma and Grandpa. Seeing the anxiety in Emma's eyes, Mary's heart tightened. But she had no other options. She gave her daughter one last kiss and got into the car. Watching Emma's small figure in the rearview mirror, she felt almost like she was praying. The surgery was successful. As Mary woke from anesthesia, in the foggy consciousness of her hospital bed, her first thought was of Emma. Hospital protocol required her to stay overnight. Her nursing colleagues took turns checking on her, and Dr. Richardson confirmed her good recovery during his rounds. You should be able to be discharged tomorrow afternoon. Just don't lift heavy objects or make sudden movements for at least a week. Mary nodded. She planned to pick up Emma as soon as she was discharged. She tried to call her parents, but Barbara answered briefly with, "Emma is fine," and quickly hung up. The next day, after completing the discharge procedures, Mary took a taxi to her parents' house. Her body still felt pain, but her desire to see her daughter was stronger than anything. When she arrived at her parents' house, Barbara opened the door. "Oh, you're discharged already. That's sooner than expected." Mary entered the house. "Where's Emma?" "She's playing somewhere." Barbara waved her hand. "Would you like some tea?" "No, I want to take Emma home." "Emma. Mommy's here." When there was no response, Mary began to feel anxious. Looking around the living room, she saw Robert reading his newspaper in his usual spot. "Dad, where's Emma?" Robert shrugged. "Don't know." Barbara was looking after her. Mary's anxiety increased. She started searching the house. Kitchen, guest room, backyard. Emma was nowhere to be found. "Mom, where is Emma?" Mary's voice trembled with anger and fear. Barbara pursed her lips. "Don't make such a fuss. She's around here somewhere." Mary headed for the garage. Her heart was racing. In the corner of the garage, there was a doghouse for Robert's old Labrador retriever. The dog had died years ago, but the kennel was still there. And then, Mary's blood froze. A small crying sound came from that doghouse. "Emma." She rushed over and crouched in front of the doghouse. There was her daughter, in dirty clothes, sitting there trembling. Emma's face was stained with tears and dust, her eyes wide with fear and relief. "Mommy." Emma's voice was hoarse. "I'm hungry." Mary lifted her daughter and held her tightly. Emma's body felt cold and seemed thinner. "How long have you been here?" Mary asked in a shaking voice. "Grandma said, if I was noisy and didn't behave, she'd put me in here." Emma said, crying. "When I said I needed to go to the bathroom, she got angry." A flame of anger ignited in Mary's heart. She carried Emma back into the house. Barbara was taking something out of the refrigerator. "What did you do to my daughter?" Mary's voice was low and dangerous. Barbara turned around, showing a momentary expression of surprise before returning to an indifferent look. "Don't exaggerate. I was just disciplining her. In our day, that's how we kept children quiet when they were being noisy." At that moment, Robert entered the room from the garage. He frowned seeing the situation. "Barbara, you went too far," he muttered. Barbara gave her husband a cold look, then looked at Mary and Emma. A disturbing smile appeared on her face. "What? Still alive?" Those words broke something inside Mary. While holding Emma tightly, she said in an icy voice, "As of today, I am cutting ties with you forever. Don't come near us again. I won't hesitate to take legal action." Mary grabbed Emma's bag and left her parents' house. In the taxi, she hugged Emma and cried while Emma also cried against her mother's chest. Mary deeply regretted her poor judgment. She should have protected her daughter. Instead, she had entrusted her to the people she should have trusted the least. "I'm sorry, Emma. Mommy's here. I'll never let anything like that happen to you again." Mary wiped away her tears and made a firm resolution. This was the final goodbye. It was time to completely sever the relationship with her parents. "Emma has mild dehydration and hypothermia. Physically, she should recover in a few days, but I recommend a specialist consultation for psychological trauma," Dr. Hopkins, the pediatrician, quietly explained in the examination room. Mary nodded while gazing at the small figure of Emma sleeping on the adjacent bed. It seemed she was given hardly any food for 2 days. Her bathroom use was also extremely restricted. Mary's chest tightened with pain. The emotional wound from the treatment her daughter received was many times more painful than her surgical incision. "Thank you, doctor. We'll provide all the necessary care." After returning home, Mary decided to take a week off from work. Her colleagues understood the situation and helped adjust shifts. Emma wanted to sleep in Mary's bed for a while. She woke up with nightmares several times during the night, crying and clinging to Mary. "Mom, will I be put in the doghouse again?" Each time she heard those words, Mary felt her heart being torn apart. "I will never let that happen, I promise. We'll never see those people again." A few days later, Mary was startled by a sudden doorbell. When she opened the door, Caroline was standing there. Her sister's face was clouded with worry. "Mary, what happened? Mom called and said you came barging in, yelling like a madwoman." Mary exhaled deeply and invited her sister in. In the living room, Emma, who had been watching TV, noticed Caroline and gave a small wave. "Hello, Aunt Caroline." Caroline responded with a smile but frowned when she noticed the paleness of Emma's face. "Emma, are you okay?" Mary encouraged Emma to eat a snack in the kitchen, moving to a place where their conversation wouldn't be heard. Then she began to tell everything that had happened. How her parents had treated Emma, especially Barbara's terrifying words, "still alive." Caroline's face changed color. "I can't believe it. Mom and Dad doing such things. You didn't know?" Mary asked quietly. "How coldly they treated me when I was a child." Caroline shook her head. I wasn't aware. I thought you were a difficult child, so they raised you strictly." Mary gave a wry smile. "A difficult child? I just wasn't what they expected. You were their perfect daughter. I was constantly criticized, sometimes even denied meals. That's why I wanted to leave home early. And when I got pregnant at 18, they practically threw me out." Tears welled up in Caroline's eyes. "I didn't know. I really didn't know." "I believe you," Mary said gently. "But I can't forgive what happened this time. Emma is an innocent child, yet they treated her like a dog." Caroline's expression became determined. "I'll see for myself." That afternoon, Caroline visited her parents' house. Barbara and Robert were surprised by their daughter's visit but welcomed her warmly as usual. However, they exchanged anxious glances when they noticed Caroline's cold expression. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk about Mary and Emma." Barbara rolled her eyes. "That girl is overreacting. We were just disciplining her." "Discipline?" Caroline's voice grew cold. "Locking a 6-year-old child in a doghouse, denying her food and bathroom access is discipline." Robert cleared his throat. "Barbara went too far. I didn't know." Pretending not to know, Caroline cut off her father's excuse. "Show me the garage." Barbara resisted, but finally opened the door to the garage under Caroline's pressure. Caroline approached the doghouse and looked inside. There was a small stuffed animal and half-eaten crackers. Evidence. This is. Caroline picked up the stuffed animal with trembling hands. Emma's. She turned to face her parents. Barbara had her arms folded, wearing a defiant expression. Robert averted his gaze. Why? Caroline demanded. Why would you do this? She was noisy and disobedient, Barbara said coldly. Wasting my time. She needed discipline. Treating a child like this. Caroline's voice shook. Was Mary raised like this too? Barbara's silence was the answer. Robert coughed and said, Barbara had her ideas about how to raise Mary. I, perhaps should have intervened. Should have intervened. Caroline raised her voice in anger. You're both abusers. Both of you. And I never realized it. She looked at her parents with accusing eyes. I always wondered why Mary left home so early, why she hardly talked about our family. Now I understand. Barbara snorted. You can't understand. You've never been a parent. Does being a parent justify abusing a child? Caroline countered. Mary is a wonderful mother. She raises her child alone while working as a nurse. And she loves Emma. She knows what real love is. Caroline took a deep breath. This is the end. I'm cutting ties too. Mary was right. Barbara's face contorted. Don't say that. You're our pride. Your pride. Caroline scoffed. You don't know how to love. You only want to control. I've had enough. She clutched Emma's stuffed animal and left her parents' house. In the car, she cried violently. Her heart ached imagining what her sister and niece had experienced. And she was overwhelmed with guilt for not having noticed. That night, Caroline visited Mary's apartment again. Emma was already asleep. She handed her sister what she had found in the garage. Mary, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Mary looked at the stuffed animal and burst into tears. This is Emma's favorite. She said she couldn't sleep without it. The two sisters embraced and cried for a long time, sharing past wounds and present pain. From now on, I'm on your side, Caroline firmly promised. I'll never let them near you again. Mary nodded. The wounds were deep, but having her sister's understanding and support made her heart feel a little lighter. The road ahead would be difficult, but at least she wasn't alone. Mary, phone call. 5 months after the Emma incident, Caroline was staying at Mary's apartment. She was holding the phone with a clouded expression. Mary was preparing Emma's breakfast in the kitchen. Who is it? Caroline hesitated. It's Mom. The air froze. Mary stopped what she was doing and took a deep breath. She had cut off all contact with her parents and had sent an official warning letter through her lawyer. What does she want? Dad has had a stroke. And Mom, she's been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's disease, Caroline said quietly. They both need care now. Mary pressed her lips together. Complex emotions swirled within her. Anger, resentment, and a faint, one she didn't want to admit, sympathy. Don't they have anyone else? They had lots of friends, didn't they? Caroline gave a wry smile. Seems they were all superficial relationships. No one is willing to take on long-term care. So they turn to us, Mary's voice was cold. They only remember family when it's convenient. Emma peeked in from the living room. Mom, is something wrong? Mary forced a smile. Nothing, Emma. Breakfast is ready. While Emma was eating breakfast, Mary and Caroline stepped onto the balcony. The fresh morning air eased the tension between them a little. What are you thinking? Caroline asked. Mary looked up at the sky. Honestly, I don't feel any obligation to care for them. Especially after they. Her throat tightened. I'll never forget the sight of Emma trembling in that doghouse. Caroline nodded silently. I understand. That's what I thought at first. But. Mom was crying on the phone. For the first time, I heard regret in her voice, Caroline said. She said she would leave most of their property to us. And, she seems to want to apologize. Mary scoffed. She thinks money can solve everything. I don't think that's it, Caroline said carefully. They're genuinely in trouble. And, this might be the process toward the end of their lives. Mary was silent for a long time. Let me think about it. That evening, after putting Emma to bed, Mary called Mr. Morrison, the lawyer representing her. She explained the situation and asked for advice. Ms. Johnson, you have no legal obligation to help them, Mr. Morrison answered calmly. However, regarding the management of their property, there are several options. 3 days later, Mary and Caroline held a meeting at the law firm. Mr. Morrison provided a detailed explanation of their parents' financial situation and care options. Mr. and Mrs. Barbara and Robert Johnson have expressed their intention to transfer most of their assets to you two sisters. In return, they ask that you arrange for their care. Mary looked through the documents. Their house. It can be sold. The funds should cover the costs of a care facility. Caroline looked at Mary. What do you want to do? Mary took a deep breath. I don't intend to forgive them. But. I'll do the minimum as a human being. The decision was made. Mary and Caroline agreed to take control of their parents' assets. However, they made it clear that they would not provide direct care. The parents' house would be sold, and the funds would be used to place them in an appropriate care facility. I have one condition, Mary told the lawyer. I want to donate part of the estate to a child abuse prevention organization. Mr. Morrison nodded. That's possible. As the document preparation progressed, Caroline asked Mary, Are you sure about this? Mary answered quietly, I cannot love them or forgive them. But I don't want to remain imprisoned by hatred either. This is my way of moving forward. A week later, Mary, Caroline, and the lawyer visited the hospital. Robert was lying in a hospital bed, looking smaller and weaker than before. Barbara was sitting in a chair, holding her husband's hand. A heavy silence fell when the parents saw their daughters. Mary, Caroline. Barbara's voice trembled. Thank you for coming. Mary suppressed her emotions and began speaking in a businesslike manner. We've consulted with our lawyer and developed a plan for managing your property and care. Mr. Morrison took out the documents and explained their contents. The parents' house would be sold, and the funds would be used for them to enter a modest but clean care facility. Part of the estate would be donated to a child abuse prevention organization. The remaining assets would be used for the parents' care expenses. Robert nodded silently. Tears welled up in Barbara's eyes. Mary, Apologies are not necessary, Mary interrupted calmly. This is not an emotional decision, but a practical solution. Barbara began to cry. But we really. Barbara, Caroline gently interjected. Let's sign the documents. We can discuss other matters later. After the document signing was completed and the lawyer had left, a heavy silence dominated the room. Is Emma well? Barbara asked in a small voice. Don't mention Emma, Mary's voice was ice cold. You have no right to know anything about Emma. Robert weakly raised his hand. We were wrong. We don't intend to ask for forgiveness. We don't expect to be forgiven. Mary stared at Robert. For the first time, she saw genuine regret in his eyes. I will arrange for your care. But this doesn't mean we're becoming a family again, Mary said quietly. I might visit occasionally, but that will be out of duty, not affection. Barbara nodded, her face wet with tears. I understand. Mary and Caroline left the hospital room. Walking down the corridor, Caroline placed her hand on Mary's shoulder. Are you okay? Mary exhaled deeply. Yes. I think this is the right choice. A month later, Barbara and Robert moved to a care facility. Their luxurious house was sold, with most of the proceeds going to care costs and a donation to a child abuse prevention organization. Mary and Caroline established a trust fund to manage the remaining assets. Emma continued her psychological counseling and was showing signs of recovery. The nightmares were becoming less frequent, and she was gradually returning to being the lively girl she once was. Mary had returned to work and had also begun volunteering to support victims of child abuse. In her heart, she still had complex feelings toward her parents. She might never reach complete forgiveness, but at least she was no longer dominated by hatred. This was her path to peace. Mom, look. Emma's voice echoed from the backyard. Mary leaned out of the kitchen window and saw her 8-year-old daughter swinging high. Emma's laughter indicated that the memories of fear were fading. 2 years had passed. Many things had changed. Mary had been promoted at the hospital and had become the head nurse of the pediatric ward. She was using her own experience to train young nurses not to miss signs of abuse. Between work, she volunteered at a local child protection organization, and the support group she had established had become a sanctuary for parents with abused children. Caroline had become a partner at her law firm and was handling many child welfare-related cases. Her relationship with her sister and niece had deepened, and she visited Mary's house every weekend. I saw Emma's report card, Caroline said as she prepared for a barbecue in the backyard. It's really good. Mary smiled. Yes, the counseling has helped. According to her teacher, Emma has remarkable resilience. The two watched the daughter quietly. Emma hardly talked about the Doghouse incident anymore. Surrounded by professional help and the love of Mary and Caroline, she was healing little by little. Do you ever think about them? Caroline asked quietly. Mary exhaled deeply. Barbara and Robert were still living in the care facility. They were leading modest days, far from their former luxurious life. Mary visited the facility once every 3 months, out of duty. There was little conversation, it was formal. Sometimes, Mary answered honestly. I haven't forgiven them. But I feel the hatred fading bit by bit. Barbara's Parkinson's disease had progressed, and Robert had experienced a second mild stroke. Their former dignity and arrogance had receded, and they were now frail elderly people facing old age and illness. They try to apologize every time, Mary continued. But what matters to me isn't words. It's that Emma is healthy and happy, that's all. The sun was setting in the sky. Mary called Emma and began preparing dinner. Her apartment was small, but filled with love and warmth. The walls were decorated with Emma's drawings and photos of their travels. Sometimes I wonder, Mary said at the dinner table. If I hadn't been raised by my parents the way I was, how would I have raised Emma? You are a wonderful mother, Caroline said sincerely. Just look at Emma for proof. Emma was innocently laughing, excitedly talking about events at her school. There was no shadow of fear in her eyes, only hope for the future shining there. People cannot change the past. But Mary knew she could change the future through her choices. The wounds she received in childhood would not be passed on to Emma. Instead, she would give love, understanding, and unconditional support. It wasn't just a promise, but a truth proven by small daily actions. The wounds might never completely heal. But life goes on. Mary, Emma, and Caroline had built their own family. A real family, bound not by blood, but by choice and love.